The obsidian spire rose like a fractal nightmare against the artificial sky of Nexus Prime, the diplomatic hub of the Interstellar Council. Its walls were composed of metamorphic crystalline structures that shifted and realigned based on the emotional resonance of its occupants, a living architecture that reflected the most subtle diplomatic tensions. Michael Chen stood at the entrance, his cybernetic prosthetic leg humming with a carefully concealed quantum capacitor. The leg was more than a replacement for the one he'd lost during the Proxima conflict. It was a testament to human resilience, a piece of technology that blurred the line between organic adaptation and mechanical innovation. 3 standard galactic cycles had passed since humanity's controversial admission to the Interstellar Council. Those cycles had been a gauntlet of diplomatic humiliation, bureaucratic stonewalling, and barely concealed contempt. Chen knew this hearing was different. This was humanity's last chance to prove its worth, or be summarily dismissed from galactic affairs. His team had spent years preparing. Dr. Aisha Nomani's quantum data compression algorithms were sewn into the microcircuitry of his tactical suit. Hidden communication nodes, developed by a team of rogue AI specialists, were integrated into his neural interface. Each piece of technology was a quiet rebellion, a technological sleight of hand that would have been impossible for any other species to conceive. The chamber's entrance irised open, a biological mechanism that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Chen stepped forward, his movement deliberate, each step calculated. Around him, the most powerful beings in the known galaxy assembled. To his left, the crystalline archons of Kepler 452 shimmered like living prisms, their molecular structure constantly rearranging to communicate complex diplomatic nuances. Their translucent bodies caught and refracted light in impossible geometric patterns, each shift a silent language of political intention. On the right, the methane-breathing Vornex delegates sat encased in their protective environmental suits, living computers more than biological entities. Their suits were marvel of engineering, each one a mobile life support system that processed information at quantum speeds. At the chamber center, the Silicon Collective of the Andromeda Nexus pulsed with mathematical precision. They were less individuals and more a distributed neural network, their consciousness spread across multiple crystalline nodes that hummed with computational energy. Chen knew each of these species considered humanity little more than a temporary anomaly, a young, chaotic species that would soon be regulated, controlled, or simply forgotten. His prosthetic leg remained absolutely still, its quantum capacitor carefully masked by a sophisticated adaptive camouflage. Inside the device, a quantum-entangled communication burst waited, a last resort weapon that would force every species in the chamber to experience unfiltered communication. The chamber's translation matrices hummed to life, a sophisticated network of linguistic algorithms that normally smoothed out the rough edges of interspecies communication. Each species heard what they wanted to hear, the system designed to maintain diplomatic politeness over raw truth. Chen's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, a micro-gesture that would initiate the first phase of their plan. The lead arbitrator, a being composed of what appeared to be living mathematics, began the standard procedural introduction. Its voice translated through multiple layers of diplomatic filters, each word carefully chosen to maintain the illusion of galactic harmony. Humanity's continued presence in the Interstellar Council remains under evaluation. Chen allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Under evaluation. The most diplomatic way of saying, "We're going to crush you." Not if he could help it. The quantum capacitor in his leg began to build charge, a subtle vibration that only he could feel. Aisha's voice echoed in his neural implant. Preliminary systems are green. Quantum burst ready in 3, 2, 1. The chamber had no idea what was coming. The research complex sprawled across an abandoned lunar base at the edge of the Sol system, a labyrinth of converted research modules and jury-rigged communication arrays that would have made any official scientific body apoplectic with rage. Dr. Aisha Nomani moved through the space like a digital ghost, her augmented reality interfaces dancing around her like swarms of luminescent insects. "We're in," she muttered, more to herself than to the team surrounding her. The "we" was a collection of humanity's most brilliant and most wanted. Dr. Reg of Mera, a quantum cryptographer who'd been officially declared dead 3 years ago after exposing corporate manipulation of faster-than-light communication protocols. Zara Kim, a xenorchaeological data pirate whose ability to extract information from seemingly corrupted data streams was legendary in underground scientific circles. And Viktor Volkov, an ex-military AI specialist who'd been discharged for dangerous philosophical incompatibility with standard military thinking. Their target was nothing less than the most secure data vault in known space, the Interstellar Council's archival nexus. Conventional wisdom said it was impossible. The vault was protected by quantum encryption that shifted its fundamental mathematical basis every microsecond. Its security systems were adaptive, learning from every attempted breach faster than any known intelligence could comprehend. But humanity had never been good at accepting conventional wisdom. Zara's fingers flew across a holographic interface, her neural implants interfacing with a custom-built quantum decryption rig that looked like a nightmare fusion of biological circuitry and salvaged military hardware. "First firewall is pure mathematical nonsense," she said, a predatory grin spreading across her face. "They're using recursive encryption that loops back on itself. Clever, but not clever enough." Rajiv watched the data streams, his augmented eyes tracking patterns invisible to normal human perception. "It's not just encryption," he warned. "This is active misdirection. Every path we think we're breaking through is actually a carefully constructed illusion." The vault wasn't just a repository of information. It was a living system of disinformation, designed to protect the most dangerous secret in galactic history. Victor worked on a separate system, his muscular frame hunched over a console that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. "I'm detecting multiple layers of quantum entanglement," he reported. "These aren't just data protection protocols. They're designed to literally rewrite the perception of whoever attempts to access them." Aisha understood immediately. This wasn't just about hiding information. It was about controlling reality itself. Her custom-built quantum processor, a device that would make most scientific institutions weep with its impossible design, began to work. It wasn't trying to break through the encryption. Instead, it was mimicking the vault's own computational logic, creating a kind of informational camouflage. "We're not breaking in," Aisha explained, her voice a mix of scientific excitement and revolutionary determination. "We're becoming the system." Hours passed, or perhaps moments. Time became a fluid concept when dealing with quantum-level information manipulation. Then suddenly, everything changed. A cascade of data began to flow, not in bytes or streams, but in complex geometric patterns that seemed to breathe with living information. The team watched in a mixture of horror and scientific ecstasy as the true nature of the Interstellar Council's control began to reveal itself. It wasn't just technological suppression. It was systematic evolutionary control. Detailed records showed how emerging civilizations had been nudged away from critical technological breakthroughs, not through crude interference, but through mathematically precise manipulation of probability itself. Each species that showed potential for rapid advancement was subtly guided away from its true path. "My God," Rajiv whispered, "they've been pruning the evolutionary tree of intelligent life." Zara's hands were shaking as she processed the implications. Star systems that had been on the brink of massive technological revolutions suddenly and inexplicably stalled. Civilizations that should have flourished reduced to technological stagnation. And humanity. They were an anomaly, a species that had somehow slipped through the cracks of this grand, terrible design. Aisha looked up, her eyes reflecting the cascading data. "We're not just going to expose this," she said, her voice cold and certain. "We're going to burn it all down." The forbidden archives had been breached, and nothing would ever be the same again. The holographic display flickered to life in the council chamber, a weaponized presentation that would forever change the understanding of galactic development. Michael Chen's voice was clinical, detached, the voice of a surgeon preparing to dissect a living organism of lies. "What I'm about to show you is not a theory," Chen began, his cybernetic legs subtly humming with contained energy. "This is a comprehensive forensic analysis of systematic technological suppression spanning thousands of star systems and millions of years." The first projection materialized, a three-dimensional timeline that pulsed with living data. Civilization after civilization appeared as delicate crystalline structures, each one showing a moment of potential breakthrough, followed by an inexplicable collapse. The crystalline archons of Kepler 452 shifted uneasily. Their translucent bodies refracted light in agitated patterns, a language of diplomatic distress that spoke volumes. Chen zoomed in on the first example, the Orcs' civilization of the Orion Arm. Archaeological and technological records showed they were mere decades away from developing stable quantum communication networks. Their scientific community had made breakthrough after breakthrough, pushing the boundaries of known physics. Then, suddenly, nothing. "Watch closely," Chen instructed, his fingers dancing across a holographic control interface. The projection began to slow down, breaking the civilization's technological progression into microscopic moments. A quantum fluctuation here, a precision-guided molecular destabilization there. Each intervention was so subtle, so mathematically perfect, that it would appear to be a natural occurrence to any traditional scientific analysis. But this was no natural progression. This was murder, technological genocide. The Vornex delegates, those methane-breathing computational entities, began to leak coolant, a sign of extreme agitation in their complex biology. Their environmental suits hummed with increased processing power, desperately trying to analyze the unfolding presentation. Chen moved to the next civilization, the Hyalurine Wave Riders. They had been developing a revolutionary energy transmission technology that could have transformed entire galactic sectors. Their research was sound, their mathematical models perfect, except for one microscopic quantum interference pattern that would cause complete system failure at the most critical moment of testing. "These are not isolated incidents," Chen continued. His voice was a scalpel, cutting through diplomatic pretense. "This is a systematic approach to controlling technological development across the galaxy." The Silicon Collective of the Andromeda Nexus began to pulse erratically. Their distributed consciousness was experiencing something unprecedented, a total breakdown of their established computational models. Each projection told a similar story. Civilizations on the brink of massive technological breakthroughs, suddenly and inexplicably pushed back, not through crude interference, but through mathematically precise quantum manipulations that would appear as natural limitations to any traditional scientific investigation. Faster-than-light communication attempts, subtly destabilized at the quantum level. Advanced energy production technologies, mathematically nudged into fundamental impossibility. Genetic optimization research, quantum-level probability fields adjusted to introduce precisely calculated mutations. "The trap," Chen said, his voice cutting through the chamber's stunned silence, "is not physical, it's probabilistic." He activated the final projection, a comprehensive model that showed the quantum interference patterns across multiple civilizations. It was a horrifying tapestry of controlled evolution, a grand design of suppression that had been operating for millennia. The Interstellar Council had not just been controlling technological development. They had been engineering the very potential of intelligent life itself. "You haven't been protecting the galaxy," Chen declared. "You've been strangling it." The chamber was dead silent. Alien representatives who had existed for thousands of years found themselves confronted with a truth more devastating than any military defeat. This was an assault on their fundamental understanding of existence. Chen's cybernetic light pulsed once, a signal to the team waiting beyond the chamber. The real presentation was about to begin. and humanity was just getting started. The prototype sat on the presentation pedestal like a living contradiction, a device that could not exist. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her movements deliberate, each step a calculated demonstration of human unpredictability. The device was roughly the size of a human hand, its exterior a mesmerizing blend of organic neural networks and quantum computational matrices that seemed to breathe and pulse with an almost sentient energy. "What you're seeing," she announced to the stunned council chamber, "is the Chimera processor, and it breaks every single fundamental law of computational physics that your species has established." The device was more than just a technological breakthrough. It was a middle finger to the entire concept of technological limitations. Traditional computational systems worked on binary principles, on and off, 0 and 1. The Chimera processor operated on what the research team called quantum probabilistic harmonics, a computational method that didn't just calculate possibilities, but actively engaged with potential realities. Viktor Volkov, standing at the back of the chamber, allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The device was the result of what most scientific communities would call organized chaos, a development process that violated every standard research protocol. The team had developed the Chimera processor through what could only be described as scientific jazz. No linear research path, no standard methodology. Just brilliant minds working in a state of controlled madness, bouncing ideas off each other at quantum speeds, following intuitive leaps that would make any traditional research institution spontaneously combust. Elena began her demonstration. The processor's exterior shifted, not through mechanical movement, but through what appeared to be a living reconfiguration of its molecular structure. Crystalline neural networks formed and dissolved. Quantum entanglement points flickered in and out of existence. "Traditional computing is deterministic," Elena explained. "You input a problem, and the system follows a preset path to a solution. The Chimera processor doesn't solve problems, it explores them." To demonstrate, she projected a complex mathematical problem onto the chamber's holographic interface. It was a computational challenge that would take traditional supercomputers centuries to solve, a multivariable optimization problem involving quantum state predictions across multiple parallel universes. The Chimera processor solved it in 2.7 seconds. But that wasn't the truly impossible part. As it solved the problem, the device began to generate additional solution paths that were not just mathematically correct, but creatively innovative. It wasn't just computing. It was thinking, imagining, exploring potential realities that no standardized computational system could conceive. The silicon collective of the Andromeda Nexus began to vibrate, a sign of complete computational dissonance. Their distributed neural network was trying to comprehend a computational method that fundamentally challenged their entire understanding of information processing. The crystalline archons of Kepler 452 shifted into configurations of pure mathematical uncertainty. Their translucent bodies refracted light in patterns that suggested both total comprehension and complete bewilderment. "This is how humans innovate," Elena continued, her voice a blend of scientific precision and revolutionary passion. "We don't just solve problems. We redefine the entire concept of problem solving." The Chimera processor was more than a technological device. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity's greatest strength was not technological precision, but the ability to think beyond established technological boundaries. Viktor stepped forward, adding context to Elena's demonstration. Every other species approaches technological development like a chess game, trying to predict and control every possible move. Humans play more like jazz musicians. We improvise. We follow intuitive leaps. We turn limitations into opportunities. Michael Chen, watching from the side of the chamber, knew this moment was more than a technological demonstration. It was humanity's true first contact with the galactic community. They weren't just presenting a new technology. They were showing the galaxy a fundamentally different way of existing. The council chamber hung in perfect, breathless silence. The moment stretched, pregnant with potential, balanced on the knife's edge of a paradigm shift that would reshape galactic civilization forever. The moment Chen's quantum burst activated, reality itself seemed to fracture. Information transformed from a controlled stream into a quantum-entangled tsunami. The council chamber's sophisticated translation matrices, systems designed to smooth diplomatic communication and maintain carefully constructed illusions, began to disintegrate in real time. Every species heard the truth, not filtered, not translated, raw and unfiltered. Aisha Nomani's communication weapon was more than a simple broadcast. It was a living information ecosystem, a distributed network of quantum-entangled data seeds that would replicate, mutate, and spread faster than any communication suppression system could comprehend. The first wave hit like a computational hurricane. Diplomatic firewalls collapsed. Information quarantine protocols shredded themselves. The carefully maintained barriers between civilizations, barriers that had existed for millennia, became transparent, their underlying mechanisms exposed in brutal, microscopic detail. Chen's neural implant tracked the broadcast's progression. Each data seed was a fractal of truth, capable of reassembling itself, of finding new transmission pathways the moment any attempt at suppression was made. The Vornex delegation's environmental suits began to leak critical information. Classified diplomatic records, suppressed technological research, centuries of hidden manipulations, all began to pour out like a digital hemorrhage. Quantum cascade initiated. Aisha's voice echoed through Chen's neural interface. Spread is exponential. No known communication defense can stop this. The broadcast wasn't just sending information. It was rewriting the fundamental understanding of galactic communication itself. Each civilization received not just raw data, but the contextual framework to truly understand its implications. The quantum seeds carried more than information. They carried understanding, emotional resonance, the ability to comprehend the true scale of the Interstellar Council's manipulations. The crystalline archons of Kepler 452 began to fracture, literally and metaphorically. Their molecular structures could not maintain cohesion when confronted with the total exposure of their civilization's manipulative history. Multiple communication vectors detected. Victor's voice cut through the neural network. We're seeing something unprecedented. The broadcast is adaptive. It's learning, evolving with each transmission point. Chen watched as the chamber descended into chaos. The most powerful beings in the galaxy were experiencing something they had never conceived possible: total, unfiltered transparency. The Silicon Collective of the Andromeda Nexus began to pulse erratically. Their distributed consciousness, built on millennia of carefully controlled information flow, could not process the sudden influx of raw, unfiltered truth. But the most shocking aspect wasn't the information itself. It was how the information was being transmitted. Aisha's quantum communication burst didn't just send data. It sent context, emotional resonance, the ability to truly understand the scale of manipulation that had been occurring. Smaller civilizations, those that had been systematically suppressed for generations, began to receive not just information, but the comprehensive understanding of how they had been controlled. A Hylaran wave rider diplomat collapsed, its semi-translucent form fragmenting as centuries of suppressed technological potential suddenly rushed into its collective consciousness. Full-spectrum information cascade, Aisha reported, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and revolutionary determination. We're not just broadcasting. We're fundamentally restructuring the entire concept of galactic communication. Chen's cybernetic leg hummed with contained energy. Each pulse was a signal, a quantum heartbeat that synchronized with the broadcast's expansion. The broadcast was alive. It was a living system of information that would continue to grow, to adapt, to find new transmission pathways the moment any attempt at suppression was made. This wasn't just an information release. This was a complete restructuring of galactic communication itself. In the council chamber, diplomats from 1,000 worlds watched as their carefully constructed realities began to dissolve. and humanity was just getting started. Diplomatic channels across the galaxy erupted in a symphony of chaos. The communication burst had done more than expose secrets. It had created a cascading revolution of consciousness that no firewall, no political mechanism could contain. In the council chamber, the first assassination attempt came from an unexpected source. A junior diplomatic attaché from the crystalline Archons, a being that had previously been nothing more than a silent observer, suddenly produced a quantum phase disruptor. The weapon was designed to unmake molecular structures at the quantum level, capable of reducing a target to pure statistical probability. Michael Chen didn't even flinch. Viktor Volkov, positioned strategically near the chamber's secondary exit, had already anticipated such a move. A quantum-dampening field erupted from a device hidden in his tactical suit, rendering the disruptor nothing more than an inert piece of crystalline metal. Threat neutralized, Victor muttered into his neural comm, his voice clinical and detached. But the assassination attempt was merely a symptom of a much larger breakdown. The Interstellar Council's communication networks began to fragment. Centuries of carefully maintained diplomatic firewalls collapsed like wet paper. Each species was suddenly confronted with the raw, unfiltered history of their interactions, not just the official narratives, but the true, brutal mechanisms of control. A delegation from the Vornex Computational Collective began to fracture. Their highly integrated consciousness couldn't process the simultaneous revelation of their civilization's complicity in systematic technological suppression. Some members began to actively disconnect from the collective, a process that was tantamount to psychological suicide for their species. Aisha Nomani watched the cascading effects through a distributed quantum monitoring system. Each communication node was a living data point, tracking the revolution in real time. "We're seeing complete systemic collapse," she reported to Chen through their secure neural link. "The broadcast isn't just exposing information. It's creating active resistance nodes across multiple civilizations." The most unexpected development came from within the council itself. A faction of long-suppressed diplomatic representatives began to align with humanity's revelation. These were beings who had spent generations feeling the subtle pressure of the council's control, who had watched their own civilizations systematically pushed away from critical technological breakthroughs. They were no longer willing to remain silent. The Hylaran Wave Rider Diplomatic Corps, a species that had been on the brink of multiple technological revolutions before being mysteriously stalled, began to broadcast their own historical data. Centuries of suppressed research, of innovative potential that had been methodically crushed, now flooded the galactic communication networks. Chen recognized the moment for what it was, not just a diplomatic incident, but the beginning of a galactic reset. "We're past the point of no return," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else in the chamber. The quantum communication burst had transformed from a simple information release into a living system of resistance. It didn't just expose truth, it created the conditions for fundamental change. Smaller civilizations that had been marginalized for generations suddenly found themselves with a voice. The broadcast carried not just information, but the contextual framework to understand their own suppression. It was a form of technological empowerment that went beyond mere data transmission. Victor tracked multiple emerging resistance nodes. "We're seeing spontaneous coalition formation," he reported. "Species that have never communicated directly are now sharing suppressed research, comparing notes on their systematic marginalization." The crystalline Archons of Kepler 452 were the first major power to fully collapse. Their molecular structure, once a marvel of adaptive diplomacy, began to fragment as the truth of their manipulations became impossible to contain. Their representative in the council chamber turned to Chen, its crystalline form now more fracture than structure. "What have you done?" The being's voice was a mixture of terror and something else, something that might have been respect. Chen's response was simple. "We've started a conversation that was long overdue." The diplomatic inferno was just beginning, and humanity had lit the match. The proposal was nothing short of a complete reimagining of galactic civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a holographic war room, her presentation a living, breathing organism of potential. Behind her, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy pulsed with quantum-entangled data streams, each point of light representing a civilization, a potential, a possibility. "We're not here to replace the current system," she began, her voice carrying the weight of scientific revelation and revolutionary potential. "We're here to transform it." The Collaborative Advancement Protocol, as the human team had dubbed their proposal, was more than a diplomatic document. It was a fundamental restructuring of how intelligent life would interact, develop, and evolve. Traditional galactic governance had been a top-down model of control. The Collaborative Advancement Protocol proposed something radical, a distributed, adaptive network of technological and cultural exchange that would allow each civilization to develop at its own pace, with support rather than suppression. Viktor Volkov manipulated the holographic display, showing how the protocol would work. Each civilization would become a node in a living, breathing network of shared knowledge. Not a hierarchical system of control, but a true ecosystem of intellectual and technological development. "Imagine," he said, "a galactic system where technological breakthrough in one civilization becomes an opportunity for all, rather than a threat to be contained." The holographic display began to demonstrate potential scenarios. A breakthrough in quantum communication by one species would be immediately shared, with built-in adaptive mechanisms that would help other civilizations integrate the technology according to their own developmental stage. Genetic research would no longer be a competitive field, but a collaborative one. Educational systems would be interconnected, allowing for cross-species knowledge exchange that respected individual cultural contexts. Aisha Nomani stepped forward, her augmented reality interfaces dancing around her like luminescent butterflies. "The key is adaptive contextual translation," she explained. "Not just converting language, but providing the cultural and historical framework to truly understand." The protocol was designed with multiple fail-safes. Unlike the previous system of control, this was a truly dynamic model. If a civilization began to develop in a potentially destructive direction, the network would provide contextual guidance, not through suppression, but through understanding. Michael Chen watched from the side, tracking the reactions of the diplomatic representatives who remained. The council chamber was no longer a place of rigid hierarchy, but of potential transformation. "We're proposing a living system of governance," Chen explained, "one that evolves as fast as the civilizations it supports." The most revolutionary aspect was the protocol's foundational principle. Technological development was not a zero-sum game. Each breakthrough, each moment of innovation, would be seen as a collective achievement rather than a potential threat. The holographic display began to show simulation models. Civilizations that had been systematically suppressed started to demonstrate exponential growth patterns. The Hylaran Wave Riders, for instance, showed potential technological trajectories that had been deliberately blocked for generations. "This isn't just about releasing suppressed potential," Alina continued. "This is about creating a galactic ecosystem of innovation." The protocol included comprehensive mechanisms for cultural preservation. Unlike previous models of technological exchange that had led to cultural homogenization, this system was designed to celebrate difference. Each civilization would maintain its unique identity while participating in a broader network of shared knowledge. Quantum communication nodes would allow for instantaneous, context-rich communication. But these would not be controlled channels. They would be adaptive, self-regulating systems that respected individual and collective autonomy. Victor's simulation showed something unprecedented. Civilizations would no longer be isolated points of development, but interconnected nodes of potential. A breakthrough in medical technology by one species could be immediately contextualized and adapted by another, with full respect for biological differences. "We're proposing," Chen said quietly, "a method of galactic evolution that has never been attempted before." The holographic display pulsed with potential. Each point of light represented not just a civilization, but a possibility. A future where development was not a controlled process, but a collaborative journey. The Collaborative Advancement Protocol was more than a diplomatic document. It was a blueprint for a new way of existing, and humanity was inviting the entire galaxy to participate. 15 standard galactic cycles after the day the Council's silence broke, humanity stood at the center of a transformation that no one, not even they themselves, could have fully anticipated. The Quantum Horizon Research Station orbited a region of space that had once been considered a dead zone, a massive stellar nursery where conventional physics broke down and reality itself seemed to shimmer with potential. It was now the most important diplomatic and scientific hub in known space. Michael Chen, now significantly older but no less revolutionary, walked through the station's central atrium. His original cybernetic lay had been replaced multiple times, each iteration a testament to the collaborative technological development they had unleashed. Around him, representatives from over 300 distinct civilizations moved in a complex dance of cultural and technological exchange. The station was more than a diplomatic center. It was a living laboratory of potential. A crystalline Archean diplomat, descendant of those who had once tried to suppress humanity, approached Chen. Its molecular structure now incorporated adaptive learning algorithms developed by human xenosociologists. Where once it would have been a rigid, unchanging entity, now it shifted and adapted with each interaction. The latest quantum communication network is stabilizing, the Archean reported. Its communication was no longer a formal diplomatic transmission, but a genuine collaborative update. Chen smiled. This was the future they had fought to create. The Collaborative Advancement Protocol had transformed from a radical proposal to the fundamental operating system of galactic civilization. Each breakthrough, each moment of innovation, was now seen as a collective achievement. The competitive model of technological development had been replaced by something far more complex and beautiful. In a nearby research lab, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was completing a breakthrough that would have been impossible under the old system. Researchers from the Vornex Computational Collective worked alongside human geneticists and Hylaran Waverider xenobiologists. They were developing adaptive medical technologies that could respond to biological diversity in ways never before conceived. Aisha Nomani's quantum communication network had evolved into something far beyond its original design. It was now a living system of knowledge exchange, a neural network that spanned entire star systems. Information was no longer a controlled resource, but a collaborative ecosystem. Viktor Volkov, now leading the Interstellar Developmental Coordination Center, tracked emerging civilizations with a system of support rather than suppression. When a new species showed potential for advanced technology, the network provided contextual guidance, cultural preservation mechanisms, and collaborative development opportunities. The station's central holographic display showed something unprecedented, a real-time map of galactic potential. Each civilization was represented not as a static point, but as a dynamic, evolving system of possibility. Chen reflected on the journey. They hadn't just exposed a conspiracy. They had fundamentally reimagined the concept of collective advancement. The Chimera processor, that first impossible device that had started it all, now existed in millions of variations across different civilizations. Each version was adapted to local technological and cultural contexts, a living testament to the power of collaborative innovation. We didn't just change how civilizations communicate, Chen muttered to himself. We changed how they imagine themselves. A young diplomatic intern, a hybrid being representing 3 different species, approached Chen. Her very existence was a testament to the new galactic paradigm. Biological, cultural, and technological boundaries had become fluid, adaptive systems of potential. Director Chen, she said, the latest predictive models suggest we're approaching a new phase of collective consciousness. Chen nodded. The Quantum Horizon was more than a research station. It was the birthplace of a new way of existing. As the station's massive windows looked out over the star-forming region, the boundaries between civilizations, between biological and technological systems, seemed to shimmer and dissolve. Humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't a technology. It wasn't a diplomatic breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of potential itself. The quantum horizon stretched before them, infinite, unpredictable, full of possibility.